And just like that, my friend, we are alive. Welcome to another live streaming interview of Longbox Punk. That's me. I'm Chris. I am the Longbox Punk. He is Anton W. Blake. Anton, how the heck are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Good, good. I appreciate you taking some time out of your exciting evening
hmm
of the news that you just gave me. But before we get there and before we get into Zethia, the Space Witch, and all of the things that you have going on, give me a little bit of your origin story. Like why comics? Why comics now in 2024? Like how did you end up here and now?
So, comics have been a part of my life basically from every moment that I can remember. My parents started buying floppies at corner stores wherever back when that was still a thing.
Yep.
Before I could even read. So I actively do not remember any point where I didn't have a comic book. Um, so it was pretty much aside from say cartoons, like one of my big first loves. I a few years ago actually tried to figure out like, oh, what was the first comic that my parents got me, and had to use the internet to figure it out because all of those copies of comics I had from like 3 on,
Yeah.
torn to shreds, don't exist anymore. I read them so many times as a kid, so I had to like go sleuthing to really figure it out, and finally did. It was Spider-Man 15 by Eric Larson. It was like
Okay.
fill in right before Todd McFarlane left, all that stuff. But anyhow, so it's been a very pivotal part of me for all my life, and for a very, very long time, I wanted to make comics. I certainly had plenty of plans for doing that as a teenager and into my early 20s, but had kind of convinced myself to pursue other things for work. When it came time to apply for colleges, I ended up working in film for about 8 years.
Wow.
And throughout that period, there were still times where I thought like, oh, I'd still really like to make comics. And there were a few attempts that ended up fizzling out, as often happens. And it wasn't until about, I think, mid to late 2019 where I really started committing to like, I really want to do this, like even if it's just like a side hustle, whatever. This is something that's important to me. And then I did a few shorts here and there, and then lockdown happened, and I happened to get into like just the right community that I met all these cool guys that were also similar to me, like in their 30s, 40s, 50s, had wanted to make comics, didn't. And now with all of us stuck at home, we were really going for it. And we created this fan book called Image Grand Design. It was spurred on from originally a like old cartoonist kayfabe episode that's a few folks like dove real deep on like figuring out how to do that. I joined kind of last second on that. I believe I was one of the very last people that before they cut it off of like we can't have more.
Right.
And that was just a big like I guess like kind of training camp for a bunch of us. Like we had so many late night Zooms working on pages, and almost to the date, a year after the project started, it was published digitally. There was a very small print run, and kind of from there, it for myself and so many of those other guys, we were just like, okay, well, what's next? Let's keep doing this. The ball has been rolling. So ever since then, I've been making a lot more work, and as of the past 7 or 8 months or so, I've been focusing a lot more of my time in that. I'm in a pretty privileged position right now where I can kind of commit the majority of my time to it. So that brings me to now. Yeah, it's been a funny meandering path, but is more common than one might think initially.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Like the through line of a lot of the people that I've talked to is they had comics in their hands as early as they can remember. And as much as I talk about it, I'm going to have to figure out what my first comic was because I don't remember. Like, it's either like a Lost in Space comic that came out in the late 80s, or it was like a when they were revamping a lot of the like Ninja Turtles comics based on the popularity of the show.
Right.
Like I know I have one of those that the cover isn't even attached anymore. Like it's just in the bag because I'm like, I can't get rid. Like it's a Turtles comic.
Yeah, I had so many of those. I mean, as you can see, I have a poster. I've had it since I was probably, I imagine, third or fourth birthday.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, they're Turtles, especially very formative property in general for me in so many different formats.
It's funny if I wasn't scared of completely ruining my shot, I have a poster from the original Ninja Turtles movie that was released at that, like, I'm pretty sure my dad won for me at like a Catholic church festival where like you throw the darts or whatever and then you get to pick out the thing, but it still has the like terrible like gold frame around it. But I'm like, it's got to stay. I've had that now for like 30 something years. Like it has to stay in that gold frame. So you mentioned that you had wanted to do it and kicked around ideas. And then 2019 is when you decided to like fully commit to creating comics. What did that look like specifically? Like, was that just being intentional of like 5 nights a week you were going to sit down and work on the craft, or like what did committing to creating look like for you?
It was at first it was a little tough because I was still working in film. I was a camera operator for the majority of my time in that industry, so that meant that like my days were very long. You know, a typical shooting day is about 12 hours, and right as I was like making those first very, very early moves for this, it was pretty much just like, if I happen to have a day off, because it was all freelance work that I was doing, then I'll, you know, try to do some more sketches and revisit like old ideas and see if I can rework them to fit kind of who I was at that point. And it was a lot of just slow going for a while until the first like mini comic I actually completed in, I guess it would have been mid 2019, something like that. It was a lot of just hammering it every moment that I could, that I didn't have to do whatever else, you know, any other responsibilities. Just like, all right, I'm just do this. And it ended up being like plenty of late nights and finding anything that I could do to keep me going in those like early hours. But and it was incredibly tough. Like that's what ended up keeping me from finishing projects in my earlier 20s. And I think what can discourage a lot of folks is like it's a lot of work, especially if you're doing every aspect of it. So just trying to push through and build that momentum and know that if I just stick with it, it'll actually happen.
Right. Yeah. The like having that tenacity, I think that's the right word, of just like, this can suck sometimes. And also like, I know the payoff is going to be worth it. So I just have to keep getting through the suck and like eventually it won't. So did you like, when you started those first mini comics, were you like only wanting to do writing or art, or like, were you always just kind of like I'm just going to be a one-man show, do the whole thing, and like that's just going to be my jam?
By that time, it was definitely kind of do everything. Like long ago, growing up, I had initially thought I was like, oh, I'll just be a penciler, because back then I was reading mostly Big Two and
Yep.
like reading a lot of Wizard magazine and just understanding like how that kind of hierarchy works within that side of comics, and wasn't really considering, oh, I could do everything. I could be cartoonist instead of just one little sliver. So, but after so long, like I decided like it made sense to try to do everything myself. And over time, I funny enough became way more comfortable with ink, and then now like with all sorts of mixed media than I ever am with penciling. Like I actually try to limit the amount of time I'm penciling in my process. So it basically, yeah, as soon as I came back to making this a real thing, I knew that like I'm going to do as much of this as I can. There was a friend of mine from like working in film in New York. He and I tried to work on a comic, him writing, me doing art, and ended up fizzling out because of something on my end. But aside from that one instance, so much of my decision making and like goal was always like cartoonist, like, doing it all.
I just can't draw. Like, there's never, I can doodle with the best of them, but man, I just don't have that in me. And so talking about the artwork, reading, let's get this guy up here. Wow. So Zethia Space Witch, you sent to me to give me just a taste of what you're doing. And in reading it, there were like, I really enjoy the story that you told, and I'm curious to see what else you're going to put her through. But before we get into like the story aspect of it, the artwork alone, I kept like revisiting because I was like, is he hand painting this? Is this digital? Is it pencil? Is it like pictures that you photoshopped and then like what in the heck is going on? Like, I have no idea how you put any of that together. So I wanted to talk, and you don't have to give away all of your secrets, all the magic that you're doing at the table behind you. I just like, I want you to just talk about your process with the mixed media and like how that all that kind of comes together, because I have no idea. I'm not an artist. I don't understand it. So if you could tell me just like 10% of it, that would be really awesome.
Yeah, I'm happy to go into as much of it as we have time for, really.
Great.
But yeah, it's a little bit of all of the above, essentially. I had wanted to do mixed media for quite a long time. Like Bill Sienkiewicz is my all-time favorite comic artist. I have reread like Electric Assassin, Straight Toasters, all that stuff like so many times, and like not only like trying to dissect like storytelling in it, but just like, okay, what is he using here? Like what weird thing is going on there? So for a long time, since I am pretty self-taught with almost all of my art, it was intimidating for a few years. And there's plenty of sketchbooks of me like trying to figure all these mediums out and all that. And there was a book I worked on last year called Ghost Agents, written by my friend Rocco Jerome, that he has a bunch of different artists in each issue work on different sections of this same like shared world. Oh, cool. And he very much facilitates it for like, just you do your thing. Like he asks you what you're interested in drawing, and then he'll write a story that fits in that world based on that answer. So it's like very catered to you and your strengths and your interests. It's a phenomenal deal and a great book too. Highly recommend it. But I decided in the small segment that I was doing that like this will be my testing ground for really just going all in on mixed media. And it was a 5-page story, the most recent issue of the comic. And I threw pretty much everything against the wall that I could. And I had plenty of time to, he makes sure to give you plenty of leeway in and like a good deadline so that everyone can actually get everything done, because plenty of other artists have, you know, day jobs and everything.
Right.
So I was just, part of it would be like coming like writing notes in the margins of the script to be like, maybe I try charcoal pencil on this thing, or maybe I'm doing this here, whatever. And then other times, like while I'm drawing on the board, just have like a random thought. I was like, oh, that I'm going to follow that whim right now and use this medium that I wasn't even thinking about.
Yeah.
And it turned out phenomenal. There was definitely a lot of moments in there that I had to keep telling myself, just trust the process. Just trust the process. It'll look good eventually. But after that, I felt confident enough to really just go this direction and not turn back. So about early January of this year, I started like considering this idea for Zethia. I'd had a few years ago just like the name and the very basic bare bones like concept written down in like my phone's notes, and decided like, yeah, this seems like a really fun place to play in this like mixed media realm. So parts of it are like watercolor. There's a lot of gouache painting in there. There's markers, colored pencils, spray paint, screen tone like sheets, and a little bit of digital color here and there. Like her skin tone is always digital in there, just to keep that consistent. And there is some photo mashing, as you had mentioned. Her, like the mech that she flies around in and lives in, is a miniature that I built.
That's awesome. I thought that was what was in your story earlier. I was like, wait a second.
Yeah, he's I made this before I even like finished a plot for the issue.
Okay.
I just thought it would be a fun way to do it. And for a while, I wasn't sure how I was going to integrate him. But then by the time I was deep in production of it, I just thought this looks very fun and like silly if he's just straight up photo mashed into it. So it hit the exact kind of like goofy, whimsical, like nonsense that I was looking for. So I kept it as is, but yeah, it's made out of like a lot of just like trash and craft foam and like necklace chain, all sorts of things like that. Like the base of his body and his head was from a tin of like matcha powder that I had. So his head can swivel a little bit because it is the lid. So it helps with posing him and stuff. So yeah, I've slowly but surely just accrued all of these different, creative outlets and skills over the years. Like I got that from deciding to make like little miniature terrain for things like D&D, all that. So just wanted to throw it all together in a comic, because I often find I kind of get bored with my art if it's just sticks to one type of thing, whether it be like just style of rendering or medium or whatever. And that turns out to be one of the issues that I had for like many years when I tried and failed to make comics, is just I felt too constrained for whatever reason. So being at this point and knowing, like fully being aware of that, I knew that this would help me get through to the finish line, because I could plan stuff out and also just improv some of it like on the fly. Like there were plenty of times where I didn't have any clue how I was going to be doing the page that was on the board until I was already in the middle of it.
I mean, talk about creative liberty, right? Like just to be able to do whatever as it happens. Just the beauty of indie comics creation. So have you experienced, I think I saw somewhere where you said like this is the most creative that you have felt, or the proudest that you felt making something so far. Is it because you're like pushing those boundaries on yourself of just trying new things, or is it like the story itself that you're like really resonating with and just like it, feeling like in the vibe with everything? Like what's that like?
It's a bit of both. Definitely, like I feel like more like creatively fulfilled from doing the art this way. I think it lends itself better to my sensibilities, and also I'm able to produce it much faster than I was able to when I was doing more traditional like pen and ink and say like digital color. For whatever reason, it just sped up my process. And part of that is certainly that I could like delegate of like, well, since I'm doing collage on part of this and I'm doing paint on the other, I'll do the collage while the paint's drying or something. But yeah, it just hits all of the like parts of the brain that I kind of need to find enjoyment in the process and the final like book. But also the story was a lot of fun and interesting to develop because it was a lot different from what might typically be like my like knee-jerk idea, like the very first thought that I would come up with for a comic. Like growing up, particularly in like 90s and early 2000s, like reading a lot of superhero comics, like there's that type of actiony thing is very ingrained in me. So it's hard to not immediately think about something like that. But I've found that I enjoy making things that are not that more so. So it was a little bit of a push to force myself in a different direction with story and do something that in some ways felt a bit lighter in tone, but then also had the ability to then like touch on maybe like more difficult, like emotional sorts of themes. And a big thing, especially for Zethia, is that like I want more stories out there that are just fun and like whimsical. Like I feel I've been saying this for a while, but I feel like a lot of people need more whimsy in their lives. That childlike wonder that like it's very important to like hold on to that inner child. And there are plenty of times that like over the years I've tried to ignore that inner child because so much of the world kind of tries to beat that out of you. But in these past few years, I've really pushed for myself and to try to like foster for others around me that like just let that grow and have as much fun as possible while also trying to grow in like intellectually in every possible way. So I wanted to have something fun because I feel like there's just already so much grim things in life, and there's plenty of darker media, and a lot of it is great, but I want to carve out this part of the world and like try to usher in more of that if I can.
Yeah, it's great. It kind of touches back to what we talked before we came live with the like you should be the change that you want to see. And so I think it's great that like not only do you want to see that, um, but also that you're like, no, that's the thing that I'm going to create because I want people to feel more whimsical. That's such a good word too. Like it's such a good word because it's exactly what it is. Like there's no, you can't be like, I'm feeling whimsical. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I love that you're leaning into one of the like super fun things that you did, and I want to check my notes so I don't mess this up. Hank, like, dude, that's such a playful character design, and like seeing it, I immediately was like, oh, I know exactly what this is, and even though it's so unique of a design, and so I like stuff like that, and then with Fenry, is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, great. Man, I'm like 3 for 3 so far. I better not say that because then I'll screw something up. But like just the way that you've designed these characters feels so it just feels so like whimsical, like youthful and energetic and full of just fun. Like it's just a fun book to read.
Well, thank you.
And also you like putting through some of the heavier themes in it. I was just like, how's he gonna where's this going? And then when it ended, I was like, you can't, come on, man. Like that's I went back and reread it, like, did I miss something? Is it no, this is exact, okay, all right, cool. And I don't want to, I'm like intentionally being incredibly vague because I don't want to give anything away, because I want people to go to the cosmiclionproductions.com website and order themselves a copy, which they can do right now. So tell me, because we're talking about it, so Cosmic Lion Productions, is that the imprint that you're just publishing on, or is that like your thing that you're publishing all the stuff on?
So no, I'm simply one little piece of the Cosmic Lion puzzle. It's run by my friend Eli Schwab. He started it, I believe, at least 10 years ago. Like he started just producing his own comics and a bunch of zines. He did one for the band Ween for a very long time.
No way.
And there he is.
He's also signing up in the comments. So
yeah, he is part of that crew that I met during lockdown. He put out Image Grand Design, and he publishes Ghost Agents and so many more incredible books. I could go on and on about this team. Like I have so much love for this group. I feel very lucky to be a part of it. And yeah, Cosmic Lion's been growing quite a bit over the past year. I mean, a couple of years, but especially this past year. There's at least 20 or so different titles out there. We all have a group chat that we're constantly talking about, talking with everybody. We finally all got to meet for the first time in person at Indie Comics Creator Con, or IC3 in New Haven earlier this year, after 4 years of being pals online.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's one of the best indie publishers, if not just publishers in general for comics out there right now. It's just recently, earlier this month, or this past month now, announced that we're in Diamond distribution. So slowly but surely rolling everything out. Eli has a nice little plan of trying to strategize which books come out when, to kind of complement and contrast each other in the right ways.
Yeah.
The first 3 are currently in previews for solicitation for September. Rohigashi's Half the Crown. Ben Perkins, I forget his writer's name, I apologize. Deathslinger and Wait It Gets Worse from Gideon Kendall and Doug Latino. Yeah. I'm just as big a fan of everything that's being put out by this company as I am just happy to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And a bunch of us were just at Heroes Con a few weeks ago. It's an incredible time. Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know Cosmic Lion, like you got to check us out.
Yeah. I'm definitely. I was just like looking through the website earlier today, and and I'm looking at it now. I'm cheating. I just need to be fully transparent. I'm not this good, but like just pulling up the cosmiclionproductions.com, the main like header of all the titles and all the covers of the books are just like those alone look such like a wide berth of genres
Mhm.
that it seems like, I mean, even without like digging in and spending on more than 30 seconds, it's already like, oh, it seems like anybody can just hop on this website and find their new favorite book. Like
Mhm.
that's what that feels like. And much to the chagrin of my wallet, I'm probably going to do that when we're done. Because I just like finding smaller publishers that are really finding their gears and getting traction and, you know, growing and expanding and constantly adding with like incredible creators. I feel like that is the magic that indie comics needs to encapsulate, and then
Mhm.
figure out how to hack what happened so we can replicate it to get more and more publishers
Mhm.
that are all just succeeding at the same time and kind of taking over and saying, hey, big two, like you're kind of doing the same stuff all the time. Like, can we just break the cycle of, man, this, I know I said I wasn't going to, but this is so metaphorical for like regular world stuff that's happening
Mhm.
where there's two main things and neither one of them are like, they both have positives, right? That like I'm always gonna love Nightwing and Green Arrow and
Mhm.
Hawkeye and the X-Men. Like I'm always gonna love those characters, and I'm always gonna check out some of the new stuff. And I recognize I'm nostalgic, and I
Mhm.
am a Jim Lee '90s X-Men person. Like you
Mhm.
know, I have a whole wall of X-Men stuff here.
Yeah.
Like it's never gonna go anywhere. But also that the more that I read from the indie scene, the more that I just feel like these are the comics that I want to read because they're indie creators. They're, you know, doing the DIY mindset of the like, I want to see this whimsical comic that
Mhm.
has fantasy elements and also deals with real world feelings and emotions, but also doesn't like, there's you with every other idea happening. And as a comic fan, I'm just like, man, I'm living my best life because there's all the books for everybody if you just look. Like it's just awesome right now. Just
Yeah.
to gush about comics, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of us were saying this at Heroes, and I mean, we say something akin to this often. Is just like it feels like we're in a like a new sort of golden age of indie right now.
Yeah.
I think similar to myself and a lot of my friends, pandemic helped push people to pursue this dream that they always had,
Yeah.
and it's making just some of the most interesting work. Like there were a bunch of folks that came by our tables, weren't tabling, just had their mini comics, and there's like some of them were first time doing it,
Mhm.
and they were all awesome. It was so cool to see everything. It's like I similarly grew up on, you know, X-Men and Spider-Man, Batman, all that stuff, and there'll be certain issues that I'll like go back to and have a lot of love for. But I've just drifted away from the modern Big Two stuff. Just it doesn't do it for me in the same way
Right.
anymore, and especially with being able to find basically anything that you could hope for in the indie scene.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's, you know, some digging that you have to
Right.
do
Right.
occasionally, but like once you find that gem, like there it is, and just hold on tight.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too is um the trend of current big two is like, let's get a strong 4 or 5 issue arc so we can make a trade out of it and then sell the trade. And then we'll just like set that character down for 6 years until they show up in a movie, or we make, you know, there's an online theory that everyone is Mephisto, so let's have a new Mephisto book. And like, I understand it from a business perspective, but it feels too business for me and less about the love of the characters. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
indie comic creators, everybody that, at least everybody that I've talked to, they all say the same sentiment of like, I had this character and I've, you know, been developing and working and tweaking and writing and thinking and all these things. And like, I just have that this character needs to be in print on paper in the world. And I need to make this book, and like, people just need to read this. They like, I want to see this on the shelves. I want to share the story with my friends. I want to process things, whatever it may be. But there's a much deeper connection for indie creators to the books that they're making than some of the big two, who are just like, how many books do I have to write? All right, 6 before Friday. Okay, yeah, that's fine. And they just like hammer it out. I can't write like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure there's still some like, I'm not, it sounds like I'm dogging on people. I'm not dogging on anybody. I'm just saying it feels more emotionally charged in the indie scene to see and make the comics that they're making than it does coming from the big two.
Yeah, it's hard to like, of course, boil it all down to, you know, 1 or 2 sentences, but as essentially like as great as like so many books and runs of these characters can be, it's always tough to like really dive in like super deep when there's like corporate oversight, you know, like yeah, it's never going to be able to meet the same type of like creative outlet as you doing it on your own. I mean, it's a very, you know, DIY sort of punk attitude that whenever so much money, especially like, you know, shareholder, that kind of stuff is involved, it just muddies up that process in ways that just makes it tough. Like those two sides of the world are pretty at odds with each other. So certainly every now and then, you know, you'll get an incredible thing out of one of those companies because they just got the right people involved at the right time. But it can be few and far between because of just the logistics of that.
Yeah. And there's a book that I recently backed on Kickstarter that there's no like pencil artwork done at all. The perspective is the main character is blind. And so everything that you see is just the dialogue. Every panel is just dialogue. Everything else is blacked out. And I was just like, this is such a cool idea to play with. Like, I love when books push, you hear the like, oh, they're really pushing the boundaries of what comics can do. And you're like, cool. They don't have a like panel border on the 4th page. Like, great. That's super original. Like every splash page ever. But to see stuff like that coming out of the indie scene, and, you know, things that are really like mashing up genres in one book and having multiple artists, you know, do 3 to 5 pages in the same book where it fits and it makes sense is so difficult to do. And I don't think like those are chances. And it kind of goes into the like, you got to bet on yourself. And along with that DIY mindset of like, I want to do this thing and I got to swing for the fences. I got to go all in on it. And I want to try the thing. And even if it doesn't work, like it's a thing that I wanted to do. So there it is. Instead of like, hey, yeah, I'm the, you know, big two muckety muck. And I want to do a 1st-person perspective on a superhero book. Unless you're an established creator on an established popular title, I'm specifically talking about Nightwing 102 here, because I love like that's the first book that I can think of that really did something drastically different that I don't remember seeing in anything in like the last 10 years. And everything was shown from his perspective. And so you see his like reflection in the building as he and Batwoman are swinging, through Bloodhaven, and like they just did some really cool stuff with it. And I think that, pushing the envelope of what you can do isn't because of all the muckety muck rich people that are shareholders and whatnot. They're just not willing to take those risks like indie creators are. So all of that to lead to, so in some way or another, we're going to lead to something here and not just my ranting. So with Zethia, this isn't your first book. And you've done other stuff. Specifically, you did a comic about a punk rock band, which is awfully fitting for being on this show. So I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I hate assuming and then being wrong, but I'm assuming that music has played into your influences and or inspiration. And I would love to just let's talk about music. What music is your jam? How does it play into your creative process? All of those things.
Yeah. Similarly to how like early comics were a part of my life, music was always a big part. Like both of my parents were in the like original punk scene here in Austin back in late 70s, early 80s. When they had moved to New Mexico, had myself and my sister. They were involved in music there. There's like we had a practice/recording studio room in the house that I was born. There were plenty of times that we would, as tiny kids, go to sleep while a grunge band was recording in like the other side of the house. So awesome. Yeah, I was surrounded by lots of kinds of music, but punk was always the thing that really did it for me. I have played music as well, plenty. That the mini comic you mentioned, The Glamorous Adventures of Snot Rocket, is directly based on or inspired by a real tour story that I've experienced sometime about 10, 11 years ago.
That's awesome.
So it's been with me just as long as comics have. So it's very intertwined, very much part of my identity in the same exact way. Like I was a teenager right at that perfect time in the like early to mid 2000s when all of the like 80s hardcore bands were getting back together and doing reunion shows for first time since the 80s. So got to see tons of that, and that was what like I was especially into as a teenager. Drifted towards some of the like 90s post-hardcore, like Unwound and Fugazi, all that. Kind of mixed and matched a lot of that, but also like plenty of funk and jazz and whatever else pops up. And on top of that, just I feel like that to some degree more than comics in some instances kind of influenced me to have a lot of the ideas about like creating art the way that I do. Like I had tons of just show flyers and like hanging up in my room growing up, and just surrounded by all that iconography. And on top of that, like one of my all-time favorite bands, old band from here in Austin called the Big Boys. They were part of the early punk and hardcore scene, but they like combined elements of funk into their music. A very early band to do that. They were very big, boisterous. The singer, whose stage name was Biscuit, was often in drag or other strange, like wacky costumes. He became like an all-time hero of mine. Got to meet him a few times when I was growing up before he passed away. He was just an incredible artist. I have 2 pieces of art, of like original art from him that
Cool.
are essentially just strange mixed media, like sculpture, essentially. Like I have one on the other wall in this room that's like a baby doll that's painted in weird ways, and its chest cavities open for with jewels and things. It's wild, creeps a lot of people out, but
Love it.
it very much like shows so much of essentially what is art to me too. Like it is just whatever weird things that you have lying around and are interested in throwing together. Like you can make anything out of that. So
Yeah.
and that is, the punk ethos. And I have always tried to embody that as much as I can. Like it was very instilled in me at a young age. I mean, it's hard not to when your parents had a band, like had a label that they put out their own records on, all of that. So it's
Jeez.
like it's equally part of me as comics are.
That's awesome. I love that, talking to people that were raised in and around music, because my like at home, my both my teachers were educators, but like we always had music on, like always, and it was never like, now I'm at a point where I'm comfortable in silence, but also like if I can have music on, I'm gonna have music on. And
Mm-hmm.
like so when I started working remote because of the quarantine stuff, my like Spotify hours like quadrupled, because
Mm-hmm.
then suddenly I was just like, I'm home. Like other people are like, oh, I just put on like a documentary or something. Nah. I'm like, no, I just turn on music. Like I just sit and listen. And some days if I'm in a good mood, it's gonna be something. It's gonna be like the bouncy ska. If I'm in a down mood, it's gonna be like post-hardcore screamo stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just the gamut of everything. But it's because I was raised with music all the time as
Mm-hmm.
being an outlet, as being a source of inspiration, as being, whatever. And like a lot of that stuck with me. I don't have the coordination to be musical. I understand how it works and I understand how instrument works. I just can't get my muscles to do the thing with the instruments to make anything that sounds like anything. So that's why like I leaned more towards technology and like broadcasting stuff, because that makes sense to me. Like all I have to do is understand the mechanics and I'm golden. Like I don't have to coordinate anything. I don't have to do anything like hit chords, whatever. I don't have that brain, and that's totally fine. Um, but I would imagine like having parents. Like, were there like this stereotypical like, oh, there's a recording studio in my house, so like there's some crazy stuff happening in my house. Like, do you have any stories like that?
I have a few very wacky memories, like especially very early memories that don't think anything of until much later on, and you'll be like, oh, whoa, that was like
Oh,
there was,
that's what was going on.
yeah. I mean, the biggest one that I remember, I couldn't have been, more than 4 or 5 years old. My dad and I drove outside of town in Santa Fe, where we were, to pick up some people from a van that had broken down and like go get them gas. Essentially, I didn't learn until I was at least a teenager that was the grunge band L7.
Oh.
And I was like, hey, was that? Because as a 4-year-old, you have no idea
No idea, right?
who these people are. Like, just strangers in the car with you.
Yeah,
They're being very nice, but I don't know who they are.
right.
So yeah, there was like tons of that, and even more just stories that like they would tell me from like prior to having me. Like they were very deep in the scene, and like I mean they were like back in '80s, they're just a couple of broke kids trying to do their thing, and have even wilder stories than I had on tour.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Um, so it despite being like growing up in a suburb and a somewhat kind of typical like setting, like we were always kind of the weird house, the fun family. So it's especially fun to look back on now too. And like I'm grateful for the fact that it was unconventional, plenty of things that weren't perfect. But here I am now, and um, so much of just like who I am, how I think about things is very directly influenced by that. Like I even without knowing, the words or the terms or anything, for a long time, just like had that feeling of like, oh yeah, I'll just try this. I'll just do this. I don't, maybe I'm not going to be able to stick with it or whatever, but like, why not? Just try, just throw whatever against the wall. It's fixed.
Yeah, I tend to prefer that approach to a lot of things. And like that's kind of coming through with this show where I'm like, I'm just gonna take all these things that I've thought about or seen other shows do or whatever, and I'm just gonna try everything. And then if it doesn't work, like okay, whatever. Like I did, it's not a failure. Like it's a learning. So
Yeah.
whatever. I don't know why I can't think of that when I'm doing my regular job, but it's much easier when it's your own thing because then it's just like, yeah, I'm in control. Like just do the thing. So let me see. Talked about it. Okay, cool. So we I'm just like I keep coming back mentally to like do you do mixed media art that isn't comics? Like because it seems like that's a thing that once you start doing, how do you ever stop doing it? Like,
Yeah.
it just...
Yeah, I definitely feel like at this point it's just like, yeah, there's not really much turning back from this. Like I will do other art that is more traditional pen and ink stuff. And I do occasionally do stuff outside of comics. Like I'm very deep in like the TTRPG community. I've made zines about D&D, things like that. As we talked about briefly before we came on here, I illustrated something that's compatible with the game Pirate Borg, and as of today, was announced that it was won part of the contest that it was a part of, and is going to be published in an official book for the game. So I do like dabble in that as well, and as well as like kind of some game mechanics for those types of games.
Okay.
But it's 100% like just continuing down the rabbit hole of mixed media. Like I'm working on issue 2 of Zethia currently, and now that I've especially figured out a lot of those mediums more from the process of the first issue, really feeling like kind of the pull to maybe just make a one-off painting that's not a comic, or definitely gonna I'm planning to open up commissions and largely try to do those as mixed media as well. It's easily my favorite thing to create. Like this is the most fulfilled, as we kind of touched on before, that I've felt about art in general, possibly ever. So
it's awesome.
It's there's so many avenues to continue to go, and comics might be the primary focus, but there's plenty of other things. Like I would absolutely be interested at some point in illustrating a kid's book or whatever else, essentially whatever seems fun and interesting and right at like the point in time that it might come up.
Yeah.
I just want to keep exploring and keep like testing the boundaries of all of these mediums and my own abilities.
That's cool, man. You're such a pure artist. Talking to you feels like talking to my sister who does.
Mm-hmm.
She started with oil paintings and like the charcoal on newsprint, like the classic art school things. And then she very quickly was like, no, it needs to be weirder. And so she started doing like mixed media stuff where she would paint, full pages of stuff and then go back and cut out numbers and then put the painted numbers together. And like, she got into some really crazy looking stuff. And she was just like, I'm having so much fun doing this. Like I get to do whatever. And I'm just, like if something strikes my fancy, I just do it. And like, part of me is just jealous because I don't have that brain to like make the thing like that. Like, I don't know what that would be for me. But also like, I'm also super stoked that you have found that thing for you because it's so few and far between that people find that thing that they can be like, no, this thing, like, I love when I get to do this thing and I'm challenging myself and I'm having fun with it and I'm creating something like it's tangible. I just think it's great. And I'm rooting you on from over here to just keep going. So I know Zethia is a standalone on issue 1, but also that you have several like stories planned. Is there like a grand master scheme, or are you like the artwork just like, I know I want to do more, so let's just figure it out?
It's kind of loose, but I do have like kind of an end goal in mind, story wise, and even issue count wise. And I like constantly am toying with how that might end up working out, but I like to keep it a little bit loose. Like I want to, from as many of the issues as possible, to be able to be kind of standalone in that, like the A plot, if you will, is something that is introduced and wraps up in that issue, but then underneath that there is a greater overarching story that will slowly but surely play out and will become apparent as it goes on. So, and that my process definitely for this is a lot different than a lot of other things that similar to just the following the whims of whichever mixed media I am doing on the page. Like sometimes I'll be like working on a script, but then certain pages where I just feel kind of a block on the writing side, I'll just then switch over to doing thumbnails of everything I have written, or even start thumbnailing and figure out what the script could be from that. So it seems disorganized, and would, to some folks, would probably be like very anxiety inducing to try to do it that way. But it, for whatever reason, it just works in my process. Like there's a 2-page spread in issue 1 that all of the dialogue in it, it's the heaviest dialogue scene. I didn't write any of that until I was lettering the book, because I wanted to make sure it fit into it. It really needed to fit into specific areas of the pages. And so I just waited until I had everything else figured out really nicely, and then went back and like actually laid it out, and would do those little tweaks of, if I have this sentence this long, then it won't fit in the area. So how can I reword it and still be within, the character's voice, all that kind of stuff. So, for me, it's all about that flexibility, and again, kind of improvising to some degree. And that, again, that's part of the joy of creation. And I would like to also mention, kind of back to your point of you not feeling you have the the creative sensibilities or skills or whatever. I'm also a very big proponent that like everyone should just make something, like doodle, find any kind of creative output and just have fun with it, even if it's not quote unquote good. Like I never remember the exact wording, but there's a Kurt Vonnegut quote about how just like necessary it is for you like mentally and emotionally to just make something just for the act of making it, not even the end product. Like it's just the outlet, and it's I would encourage you, and I encourage everybody that have this exact sort of conversation with, that like it's okay if your stuff isn't going to look like Jim Lee or whatever. It's like, just do it anyway.
Yeah. Yep. I think I've heard that before. Because every time I hear it, I'm like, no, that's me. Like, I just need to do the thing. And actually, after we end this, I'm gonna have you hang on because I got to get some logistical things, and then you'll find firsthand what that thing is for me. So that's coming in just a little bit. So, how do people find you out here on the interwebs other than buying all the copies that the Cosmic Lion Productions has? How do people find you online?
Best way to find me is on Instagram at mighty_peculiar. That's where I spend most of my outward facing time on the internet, at where you can find anything that I'm working on. Plenty of links to everything else is on there. I have a website, antonwblake.com. That also will lead you to Cosmic Lion or Big Cartel for some of my other like mini comics and zines and all that.
Cool. I will double check. I think I have all of that already in the video description. I will double check that though to make sure before we drop. And then, okay, so that's the end of my notes here. They're there. That's my notes. So that's I like to prove that I try and put some thought into this, more for me than really anybody else. So before I end any of these, I always like to just turn the floor over to you, because I find that a lot of times indie creators have a lot of really good stuff to say. So I am going to shut up, and this is the floor is yours for anything that you want to say, whether it's, about the book, it could be about you, it could be about bananas, whatever. It's the open space for you to share anything that you've got on your heart, on your mind, on your shoulders, anything like that.
Sure. I mean, first, I would, of course, love anybody who hasn't check out the book. It's a lot of fun. I think so. Chris says so as well. So, but just kind of harp on what I had just said before. Of like, I feel like people should let themselves just try to be creative in whatever way it is that they feel comfortable, whatever feels right, in the moment. Like, it is vital for all of us to be able to do those sorts of things just for our soul. It's we get bogged down by like this notion that we're kind of fed that everything has to be commodified and it has to be like a certain like fit into certain boxes and be like a certain quality, whatever that means even. And that all that ends up doing is just kind of squandering the potential that you all have, that we all like have. Like, just go make something. That band that I mentioned before, the Big Boys, one of the best things from them, aside of just their music, Biscuit, at the end of every show, his send off would be, now go start your own band. Like, just do whatever it is that you want to do, like just for yourself. Even like there's nothing more important than that. And I feel like that's the ultimate like whimsical goal that I have, like instill that into other people, because I'm having the time of my life doing that. And I'm pretty damn sure you will too, if you just pursue it in any capacity that you're able to.
I love it. That's yes. Yeah, I'm gonna tweak my closing line just for that thing. That's awesome. I love it. I love the way that your brain works. I love that you're having a great time doing the thing, making comics, and encouraging me to make a thing. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you taking some time out of whatever day it is right now. Is it Monday? It's Monday, right? Yeah. It's Monday. Okay. So I have tomorrow off from work. And so it's like completely thrown off everything mentally for me. So that's neither here nor there. Speaking of here, we're at the end of the interview on another episode of Long Box Punk. I appreciate everybody checking out, being active in the comments. I love being able to show off comments to all of our creators and doing all the things. Especially when they say that we had a great chat. That's great. I'm a fragile person, but I appreciate, Anton, you just taking some time and just sharing and opening your brain to me and sharing your process. And I definitely think that people need to go and order Zethia issue 1 right now from Cosmic Lion Productions. I'm going to make sure that is linked in the description if it isn't already, but I'm pretty sure it is. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I look forward to what you've got coming next. Hang tight after I end this. I got some logistical stuff for you. And that's going to do it for this episode of Long Box Punks. So, you know what I'm going to say, punks, is instead of go reading, you should go make your own indie comics. See what I did there? I'm so clever. That's going to be it. Until next time, punks, we're out of here.